Okay, we're going to try the flipped classroom here, Unit 1, Learning Target 1, Peopling of the World. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of this section, I want to just briefly give you a little background about early human or mankind. Humans made important advances during a period known as what we call the Stone Age, when people used tools made of stone. At this time, they also began to use fire and learn to speak to one another. Scientists divided the Stone Age into two parts. The time period we call the Paleolithic Age, or Old Stone Age, which began about 2.5 million years ago and lasted until about 8000 BC. The Neolithic Age, or New Stone Age, went from about 8000 BC to around 3000 BC. Much of the Old Stone Age overlapped into what we call the Ice Age, when the Earth was colder than it is now. Huge sheets of ice, known as glaciers, covered much of the land. About 10,000 years ago, the Earth's temperature increased. These sheets of ice grew smaller. People began to roam wider stretches of land. In East Africa, archaeologists found hominid fossils that they named Homo habilis. That means man of skill. The fossil was given this name because the site also held tools made of lava rock. Homo habilis lived about 2.5 million years ago. About 1.6 million years ago, another kind of hominid lived called Homo erectus. Homo erectus began to use tools for special purposes. When this technology began, Homo erectus dug for the food in the ground, cut meat from animal bones, scraped animal skins. Homo erectus also used fire and may have had even a spoken language. This was the dawn of the modern human. Many scientists believe that Homo erectus eventually developed into what we call Homo sapiens, or humans. Scientists thought that Neanderthals were the ancestors of our modern humans, but no longer do to this day. These hominids appeared 200,000 years ago. They lived in caves or built shelters of wood and animal skins. They thought it would be rough and wild people. Now scientists think that they may have held religious beliefs. These people found ways to survive the freezing cold during the Ice Age. Around 30,000 years ago, though, the Neanderthals strategically disappeared. 10,000 years before these people vanished, the Cro-Magnon appeared. The bodies were just like those of modern humans. Scientists think that these people worked with one another in planning large-scale hunts for animals. Scientists continuing to work on sites in Africa, making new discoveries, and continue to add to what we know about human origin. This leads us into Section 2, Humans Try to Control Nature. The development of agriculture causes an increase in population and the growth of a settled way of life. First area we want to look at is the early advances in technology and art. First, humans had faced a struggle for survival. As you can see here, the need for tools. Oops, let me go back. For thousands and thousands of years, they had two concerns: finding food and protecting themselves. They used fire, built shelters, made clothes, and spoke languages. These areas of life are all part of culture. Human culture changed over time as new tools replaced old ones and people tested new ideas. Later, some modern humans increased the pace of change. The people who had lived in the early part of the Old Stone Age were what we referred to as what we call nomads. They moved around in search for food. They were hunters and gatherers. They collected animals, collected plants. They hunted for animals. They found food by hunting and gathering nuts, berries, and roots. The Cro-Magnon people who came later made tools to help them in their search. These early modern humans used many tools, more than 100 different ones. They used stone, bone, and wood. They made knives, hooks, and bone needles. The Cro-Magnon people also created works of art, including paintings. Thousands of years ago, Stone Age artists mixed charcoal, mud, and human blood to make paint. They used this paint to draw pictures of animals on cave walls and rocks. This led to the beginning of agriculture. For centuries, humans lived by hunting and gathering. Humans lived in small groups between 25 and 70 people. They often returned to certain areas in the same season each year because they knew it would be rich in food during that time. Over the years, however, some humans realized that they could leave the plant seeds in this area one year and find plants growing there the next. This was the beginning of a new part of human life, farming. Scientists think that the climate became warmer all around the world at about the same time. Humans' new knowledge of planting seeds combined with the warmer climate created what we call the Neolithic Revolution, the agricultural revolution that occurred during the Neolithic period, about 10,000 years ago. Instead of relying on plants, on gathering food, people could now produce food. One early farming method was what we call slash and burn farming. That meant cutting trees and burning them to clear a field. The ashes were then used to fertilize the soil. Along with growing food, they also began to raise animals. They tamed horses, dogs, goats, and pigs. This was known as domestication. Domestication is called the taming of animals. Archaeologists have studied a site in northeastern part of Iraq. It was called Jarmo. People who lived in this region began farming and raising animals approximately 9,000 years ago. As you can see, wild grasses, goats, pigs, sheep, and horses thrived in areas called the Zagros Mountain, which is part of Jarmo. Villages began to grow and prosper. People began to farm in many spots all over the world. The study of one village in modern-day Turkey shows what early farming communities were like. The village was called Catalhuyuk. It grew on good land near a river. Some workers grew wheat, barley, and peas. Others raised sheep and cattle. Because workers produced enough food for all the people, others could begin developing other kinds of skills. Some made pots out of clay they baked. Others worked as weavers. Some were artists. They decorated the village. Archaeologists have found wall paintings that show animals and hunting scenes. They have found evidence that people also had what we call religion. Early farming villages had problems as well. If a farm crop failed or the lack of rain caused a drought, people starved. Flood and fires caused damage and death. With more people living near each other than ever before, diseases spread easily. Still, some of these early villages grew into become great cities. Section 3 is a case study on the civilization of Ur in Sumer. Villages began to grow into cities over time. Farmers developed new tools such as hoes, sickles, and plows. They helped grow even more food. They decided to plant larger areas of land, and the people in some villages began to irrigate the land, bringing water to new areas. People invented the wheel for carts and the sail for boats. The new inventions made it easier to travel between distant villages and to trade. Life became more complex as the villages began to grow. People were divided into social classes. Some people had more wealth and power than others. People began to worship gods and goddesses, and they felt would protect their crops and make their harvest large. How did civilizations develop? What is a civilization is the question you have to ask. One of the first civilizations arose in Sumer. It was in Mesopotamia between the Tigris and Euphrates River in modern-day Iraq. A civilization is a complex culture that has 5 features. First, a civilization has advanced cities that contain people of many types and serve as centers for trade. Second, the civilizations have specialized workers. Specialization is the development of skills needed for one specific kind of work. Skilled workers who make goods with their hands are called artisans. Third, civilizations have complex institutions. Government, organized religion, and economy are examples of complex institutions. Fourth feature of civilizations is record keeping, which is needed to keep track of laws, debts, and payments. It also created the need for writing. These types of writing that was needed, scribes, or were people that kept these written records. Cuneiform, which means wedge-shaped, was the first form of writing invented in Sumer, around 3000 BC. A fifth product of a civilization, civilizations had improved technologies that could provide new tools and methods for problem solving. Sumer had all these features of civilizations. One of the new technologies it had was the metal bronze. The term Bronze Age started in Sumer around 3000 BC, and it refers to the time when people began using bronze to make tools and weapons. Lastly, civilizations that emerged in Ur. One of the early cities of Sumer was Ur. The city was surrounded by walls built of mud dried into bricks. It held about 30,000 people. Social classes included rulers and priests, traders, craft workers, and artists. Farmers outside of the city walls raised the food for everyone to use. Some workers dug ditches to carry water to the fields. Officials of the city government planned all of these activities. Inside the city, metal workers made bronze points for spears. Potters made clay pots. Traders met people from other areas. They traded the spear points and pots for goods that Ur could not produce. This way of trading goods and services without money was what we refer to as barter. Ur's most important building was a temple. Part of the temple was the ziggurat, a pyramid-shaped structure. In this ziggurat, it was usually the tallest building, and priests could carry out religious rituals and led the city in the religious life. As you can see, this was just one example of how civilizations emerged. This is the conclusion of Learning Target 1.